Let's open our Bibles this morning to the book of Ezekiel again. We're going to stay with our foundational verse, this one last week. And we're going to continue on. The 5th verse, also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures. This was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet. And the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot. And they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on the 4 sides, and they 4 had their faces, and their wings were joined one to another. And they turned not when they went every one straight forward. Now, you're thinking angels because you see the word wings, but it does not say angels. It says 4 living creatures. As for the likeness of their faces, the 4 had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side. They 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. Thus, their faces and their wings stretched upward, 2 of every one joined one to another. Those words that I've just left out are italicized, which means they're not a part of the original text. They were added at the King James translator's discretions. So it says every 2 wings of everyone were joined, but that's not what it says. It says 2 of everyone joined one to another, straight forward. Whither the Spirit was to go, they went, and they turned not when they went. So the idea here, when we leave that word wings out, that is not a part of the original text again. We know that there's 4 creatures, and their wings stretched upward, 2 of every one joined one to another. That didn't say wings in there. We're talking about the creatures. This tells us that as the body of Christ, and it says for us to be in like faith, and of course the people you want to spend time with are of like faith. Those are the ones that we're joined together with. We're joined together with ministries of like faith. How many support a ministry? How many give to a ministry in here? That tells you should be poor and have just enough to get by on. Anyone? I don't see any hands. I thought Jason was going to raise his hands. He just scratched his shoulder back there. So I don't know if that was on purpose or he's just messing with pastor. So how many support a ministry? Who tells you that, sometimes it's not God's will to heal. Sometimes he wants you sick for a bigger, greater cause. Anyone? All right, well, let me ask you this. How many watch TV programs because they're on Christian channels that talk about things like that? Now, that's a little bit different. When I started in ministry, and the doctor said I had an ulcer and I had cancer, I wanted to get rid of both. One is a severe inconvenience, the other one more so. So I wanted to get rid of it. And I wanted to find out how to pray. I didn't trust the ones that I knew that were prayers. How come? Because I don't know what they're going to say. Sometimes they see healing, and sometimes it may not be God's will and all that. So I wanted to find out. Well, I don't know how to find out. So I'm going to have to listen to some good preaching and teaching. So I didn't know who to listen to. Back then, we're talking, what year are we talking? 1975? Or 85, I'm sorry. 1985 or so. And, there just wasn't, back-to-back good Christian shows on. There was TBN going 24 hours a day, and the PTL channel, if you remember that, 24 hours a day. But I'll tell you what, at any random time you could turn it on and someone is either telling you that God won't do it, or he's apologizing for what God does. Have you ever heard of an apologist? If you go to seminary, they will have you take a class on, what is that word that I'm looking for, Scott? Apologists. And, essentially, we're trying to make people, and we're apologizing for how good God is by making people feel better about the problems they're in. That's really it in a nutshell. They teach classes on that and courses of that. And anyone who goes to a denominational seminary is going to take classes along those lines. Well, I didn't want anyone to apologize for me having problems. Talk's cheap. I want action. And I don't want anyone to tell me, there, little fella. It's like when I started to get the word in. And I started to believe I received. And signs hadn't followed yet. I'm putting that word in because I'd gone through and asked a few people I respected, my father-in-law, who should I listen to? So after I accumulated a short list, and Kenneth Copeland was on one of them, and I happened to have a set of his tapes my father-in-law had given me a couple years earlier, that is the road of least resistance to listen to. So I decided, let's do it right. Say, I got through school with pretty good grades and never studied a bit. I didn't bother doing homework. And no one got after me about it. Some of us had deals. Nevertheless, I got good grades on most of my tests. Math, forget it, 2 + 2 = 4, I'm pretty sure. So, but everything else, great grades. I didn't have to study. Now, for the first time, I am going to study. My life up to that point had been, if it's too hard, let's go do something else. And there came a point, I'll tell you what, when I started UPS, we were at a very, very low point. I had quit jobs and mainly in retail management and retail corporate management and things, and I had quit. They didn't pay enough. You worked too hard. Frankly, it was too hard. I didn't see any promise. It's like one of the great higher ups told me. Robin will appreciate this. Well, it takes 20 years before you'll make the big bucks. And I said, how much are the big bucks? And he said, about $30,000 a year. Well, I'll tell you what. That was 1979, and I don't care. 1979, that was not the big bucks, So, anyway, when I started UPS, it was a nightmare. I didn't think I'd catch on. It was too hard. It was the middle of the night. And I made myself do it. And I made myself learn. I got good at it. But that's about as much studying as I ever bothered too much with. And even that just required really putting one foot in front of the other. If you got yourself out of bed and out of your chair and got down there, you were 3/4 of the way there. Well, I'm going to study. Now I have to learn how to study. And I'm believing God, and I've studied and I put in. But the point was, I decided that whoever I listen to, if they say one thing that I can't find in the Word, I'll never listen to them again. And I'm still that way. Except now I don't have to spend 2 hours trying to find out if it's in the Word or not. I've learned a little something. Every so often I hear something that, and that's good, I'll hear something, and I'll think about it and consider it, and I know enough word about it. Yeah, I see that, you see. But not back then. But I've noticed Christians throughout my life, very few of them are like that. And I've noticed Christians throughout my life fall under the realm of, I'll listen to the good stuff and not listen to the bad stuff that they say. And the problem is, you can't do that. And the reason is because the good stuff it gets to the point, I don't care how sincere and well-meaning you are, but there's going to very quickly turn into a deception that what you're going to listen to, you don't know if it's in the Word. It's if you like it or not. Well, if I get a witness. Well, I got news for you. If you don't know the Word, you're not going to get a witness. You're going to get likes and dislikes. Well, the Holy Spirit can tell me what to listen to and what not. Oh, he can he? And are you going to pay attention to him? How are you going to hear him? When you got the devil telling you that something about something bad, something that this guy said, and well, that makes sense. And then there's something hard about standing on faith and not allowing these things to come on you. Well, that I don't see how anyone can do that. Which witness you going to listen to now? Which one? You're going to listen. If you go and listen to the Word that way, you're going to listen to the one that feels good and you like, and that's the one who bears witness, because that's how people church shop these days. They go to a church, visit a church, and if they feel good, then they feel like they have a witness that this is the church. And if they don't feel good, then they're off to the next one. And that's not the point. The point is what is there that's accurate, and you are learning how to live a more powerful life. And until you really get into that, chances are it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have a little bad taste in your mouth. And I know I've preached in churches that you couldn't preach meat in, you had to preach milk. And I preached in a lot of churches where they cried and squawked and walked when the milk got too warm. Ow! Hadn't even said any meat. But the milk was a little warm. Oral Roberts gave him some warm milk years ago. Told him, God loves you. And boy, did he get criticized. He was criticized and run out of town. There were plans in a lot of places he went to tar and feather him. However, he that's within him is stronger than he that was in the tar and feathering business. You see, it didn't happen. But see, we have to watch and we have to pay attention to what is going on inside, what we are hearing. So there's a lot of Christian television I just plain not interested in. See, I can separate the world's television from Christian television a whole lot easier than I can Christian television from Christian television. When I see a network show about that's going to come on, God friended me. Oh, oh yeah, God friended me. Touched by an angel all those years ago. Has there been anything in between? I'm not going to watch them. I'm not going to listen to them. How come? Because the world doesn't know anything about God. And I cannot afford for the hour or half hour or however many hours I feel all good about it. I can't afford that because it will color my truth. It'll color the truth, and I'll start looking at the Word through those eyes that have been colored by what the world tells me God's like. You go watch John Wayne, Red River, or something like that, and you got Wally Cox. They're about to be ambushed by a jillion Indians. There's like 8 or 12 of them. And John Wayne says, well, Padre, if you have anything that you want to say to the man upstairs, now's the time. And he says, thank you for what we are about to receive. Well, yeah, that you laugh at. That you know is wrong. But you start watching shows, or you start watching every Christian TV program that comes down the pike, and you're listening to stuff that, well, after all, it's Christian TV. It should count with God. You're not on the point system. You don't get 10 points for good Christian programs, 5 points for lousy Christian programs, and maybe 3 points for some doubt and unbelieving music. You don't get it. There's no point system. It's all about putting that word in accurately and walking accurately. And that's what we've been talking about, so that just like them, we can join together and we go straight forward. Where are we going? Well, God has plans for you, doesn't He? I know He does. If you were here, a year or two ago, I preached a series on God's plans for you. So I know He has plans for you. Now, if you weren't here, you've heard rumors. Or you've heard someone else preach it. But God has a plan for you. But just because He has a plan for you, He has a plan for everyone. How many do you know fulfilling those plans? Well, if God wants me to have those plans, seems like He'd do it. Well, that's because you've been watching Christian programming that tells you let go and let God. Quit letting go and quit letting God. God is willing. Are you? I don't know anything that has been worth getting in all of my life that it didn't cause me a little discomfort in how to get it. Did you hear the news? Robin got promoted. She got promoted to the claims department. She's never worked there before. She just walked in and she says, I'd like a job where I didn't have to deal so much with the public. Okay, come to claims. But that's not what happened. She's been there over 20 years. She's been in the store where, huge store, 30 checkout lanes. One's open. And then they tell her to go round up the shopping carts at 12:30 in the morning. But she stayed. She stayed. If you ask me, should have left. But see, I'm not the planner. God's got plans. Now, if you really said, by the word, should I go, should I stay, well, let's get into the word, see what the word says. It's like, I'll tell you that again about the guy who sits there and says, I've got this problem, this was years ago, this problem, what should I do? Then he said, well, let's get into the word. And I started turning over here, and I said, here's what, and he stopped me, and he said, I don't want to hear what the word says, I want to hear what you think. And I says, the word says that, he says, I don't want to hear what the word says. I want to hear what you think. That went on 4 times. Finally, I was getting a little irritated. I said, you want to know what I'm thinking? And I says, I keep asking you to quit telling me what the word says. Tell me what you think. I said, I'll tell you what I think. You're in a heap of trouble. You're going under. You'll probably die too. He looked at me, his eyes got big. He said, let's go back to what the word says. You see, because that's the only thing that matters is what the word says. So if someone asks me a question, I'll get out of the way and let's go into the word. But if you really want to know what I think, did you notice I never ask anyone except Janet, what did you think of the message? How come? Because everyone heard it differently. And someone, I hope, heard it accurately. Well, you all did. I believe you did. But I don't ask, how come? Because I am very satisfied that God gave me that message. And guess what? There's some messages that I just don't want to preach. For whatever reason. Doesn't happen often. The Lord said, I want you to talk about this. He's telling me something about next week's message. I never heard anyone preach it before. I never even heard of this before. But he's percolating and showing me some things and in the Word. And I said, well, I see that. I see that. But you know what? It's not next week. It's this week. So don't go anywhere. We looked at the three faces in the past couple of weeks. The face of man, face of a lion, face of an ox, and there's one left. The face of an eagle. And what do you know about eagles? First of all, the eagle is very attentive and he has keen vision. Proverbs, the 7th chapter, in the 24th verse, says, "Hearken unto me now, therefore, O ye children, and attend to the words of my mouth. Let not your heart decline on her ways. Go not astray in her paths." Well, let's translate a little bit. Let not thine hearts decline to whose way? Her ways. Well, who's her? Well, my heart. No. Let's put the subject in here. Attend to the words of God's mouth. Don't let your heart decline from the ways of the word coming from God's mouth. And don't go astray in her paths. Well, now, if I have to be told that, and there's more than one place that tells me along those same lines, that must mean that there are plans for me to go astray and to get in a whole lot of trouble. There are plans for me to be stolen from, killed, and destroyed. But they didn't come from God. Well, you know, brother, sometimes God allows. And we don't know why God allows these things. God allows is the great deception of our Christian time. One of them anyway. There's a lot of them. Because God allows anything you allow. The Word says it. Whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth is loosed in heaven. So whatever you allow, God will allow. He gave you free will. He's not going to stop you from doing anything. He'll warn you. He'll tell you. He'll do everything he can. But he will not stop you. Well, once I was going to go rob a bank. But I'll tell you what. I got to the street where the bank on, the road was closed. So I decided that was God's way of telling me don't do it. Well, that was God's way of telling you that you're not too bright. It was not God's way of telling you anything. All it did was tell us you are lazy. You are quick to stop and to quit from what you're doing. Thankfully, you didn't rob the bank. You were dissuaded by a closed road. Lazy bones. I'm not saying you should have robbed the bank, but God had nothing to do with it. When you decide to do something, you'll do it. How many look forward to the Super Bowl today? Anyone? Do you? All right. How many are ready? Tanned, rested, and ready. I found my t-shirt from 1991. I think I got it in 1988. And I wore it to the flea market once. It had a picture of Nixon on it. Found it about a month ago. It says he's tanned, rested, and ready. Nixon in 88. I wore it to the flea market because it's funny. You know what? I was stopped over 20 times by people yelling at me and screaming at me about how bad Nixon was. And I'd sit there and say, it's a shirt and it's funny. Pardon me, I'm going to watch the Super Bowl, but I got to really tell you, when Terry said, shout like you're going to shout to the TV later, and I don't know, did I say it to you? I said it to Scott, and I said, I'll be yelling at that TV. Why isn't there something better on? Forgive me for the rest of you that love the Super Bowl. But the eagle has keen vision, and we have to have keen vision and be attentive. The dictionary says the word attentive means paying close attention, being alert or observant. So that's the thing. Sometimes we hear the word, and again, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So do we hear the word, or do we just have it going on? See, the problem is, when we just have it going on and we don't really hear it, it's better than nothing, but we're not going to really get anything out of it. However, if you have watered downward going in the background, well, I just have some of those shows on. I mean, I don't listen to them. Guess what? You will absorb it like a sponge. How come? Because Satan is the god of this world, and he will cause you to be able to hear and absorb all the things that aren't true about the things of God. But you have to hear the word for faith to come. You have to pay attention. You have to be attentive to it. And then you have to be attentive and observant in what you're going to do next, which gives us the second verse, or the second definition of attentive. Showing care for the needs or desires of others, caring or courteous. Now, I think it was the faith walk this last week that I mentioned that everyone who is trying to help God, they're not trying to help God, they're trying to help themselves. See, helping God isn't trying, oh God, I feel like, you need a little help, a little tired, you got the weight of the entire universe and everything on your shoulders. Let me help. No, you're not trying to help God. You're trying to help yourself. God's too slow. Or God's not doing it the way you'd like him to do it. And the way you always want him to do it is the way it's going to be easiest for you. And if the way that's easiest for you, it must be God, even though it's not. How come the things of God seem to come easy after you've been in this 10, 20, 30 years? I mean, you've gotten into the Word, you're really putting it in. Things start to come easier. You know why? Because you have trained yourself, it becomes a way of life. You're doing things and walking in faith. And anymore, you don't have to necessarily sit there and say, I got to walk in faith, I got to walk in faith. What did that word say? No, you train yourself. And when you're trained, just like a brain surgeon. Wade, you've had experience. Right before they put you out, you hear the surgeon, the head surgeon say, where's that book on brain surgery at? Flip that thing open. I think it's page 141. I need to see figure 6. I got news for you. I don't care how much they pump you with drugs. He'd be sitting up going, oh, I'm out of here. I mean, that's, you see, but it becomes a way of life. But now this says showing care for the needs or desires of others. Doesn't happen so much, does it? But for us to walk straight forward, we have to be attentive. We have to pay close attention, and we have to show care for the needs or the desires of others, caring and courteous. Boy, I'll tell you what. You can train yourself not to tell anyone what you're believing for. You know why? Well, most folks don't care. They're not necessarily courteous about it either. But it says that we're to agree together. You can't agree together if folks are too busy wanting you to agree with them. They're not going to agree with you. How come? They're not attentive. And you're not attentive, they're not walking straight forward. See, we have to get off of ourselves so much. Start caring for some others. Well, I do. I have this person. I don't see a limitation here. Keen. He has keen vision. Keen in the dictionary means having a fine, sharp, cutting edge or point. It means having or marked by intellectual quickness and acuity. So we're going to pay attention. We're going to have intellectual quickness or acuity, having a fine, sharp, cutting edge or point. Have you ever gotten a gift from someone, they mean well, they know you have an interest in, let's say, Wade with his home studio, and there's this new microphone he'd really like to have. It's not real expensive, but he'd really like to have that and everything. And he's got a friend that is a good friend, and he's he's not really very attentive, though. It's the problem. He's not all that sharp. So, instead of getting him the microphone, for the same money, he gets him a wall plaque with a picture of the RCA dog listening to his master's voice on the phonograph, because that'll decorate the studio. And Wade's going, and right away he's sitting here thinking, let's see, metal plaque, studio, sounds like ringing to me. Now what do I do when they come over? Now I've got to put that plaque up every time they come over. Why? That's showing attentiveness, isn't it? You see? Well, wouldn't it be great just to have that person be attentive and showing it, having a fine, sharp cut? Vision in the dictionary: unusual competence in discernment or perception, intelligent foresight. The manner in which one sees or conceives of something. Bible says, without a vision, yet my people will perish. Well, what did he say? Not just being able to see what they'd like, but having unusual. You know what unusual competence is? It's not usual. It's unusual. You don't see it all that often. There's too many people. What do you have a vision? I have a vision for my rec room. Do they even call them rec rooms anymore? Or is it, I think man cave is over. I heard some new phrase that really seemed dorky. What was it? Do you use man cave? Somehow we want to identify with prehistoric cavemen. Of course, if you're a Christian, then, there's a good chance, because I think 50% of them don't believe that cavemen and dinosaurs ever existed. So I'm not sure how that all fits in together, but the reason I mention that isn't because it's funny, but because that's how your thinking gets off the track. When it doesn't stay accurate in even the smallest, craziest things, you certainly aren't going to be able to choose to make it accurate. So I need to know how I see and conceive of something is the definition also. Unusual competence in perception, intelligent foresight, and the manner in which one sees or conceives of something. Now, I'm going to tell you, attentiveness and keen vision always go together and cannot be separated. You can't have keen vision without attentiveness. How come? Because if you see, keen vision causes you to want to act. If I see a problem in someone's life, may not talk to them, may not feel like that's the thing to do about it, but that's the problem with vision, isn't it? Most folks, if God tells them there's a problem with someone, they go right to the person and say, God told me there's a problem with you. And sometimes that's the right thing to do. But you have to use the attentiveness and the keen vision, which is also competence and foresight and intelligence. And guess what? Sometimes God don't want you to go to the person and talk to him. He wants you to pray. But now, wait a minute. That's hard, isn't it? Do you know why praying for someone's so hard? Because you don't get the credit. Well, I don't care about that. Well, I don't know. How much praying for others do you do? See? Well, I prayed on that too. Well, that's good. I mean, it depends what your motive for saying it is. In other words, I'm praying with you, I'm standing with you is a good thing. But I prayed too to jump on like, you're rolling in 30 carts, 1 o'clock in the morning, and a coworker says, let me help, and takes one. And the big boss says, thank you. They don't say that, but thank you for doing that. You did a good job. And they say, well, I helped too. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. They didn't do that to let you know I'm with you. They did that for some of the credit. And we need to have the attentiveness and keen vision to know that. Otherwise, what happens? Just the very thought of not bringing keen vision and attentiveness together means we can't go straight forward. We've already deviated. Straight forward is where we want to go. You ever, I used to play games a lot back when I was 30, and some computer games. Sometimes they were role-playing games. You ever play a role-playing game? On a computer. I didn't dress up like, and go romp around the park with 16 crazy folk who are now all of a sudden in their 50s and 60s and run everything. But I used to play, sometimes there was this space RPG. Take your little man and there was always side quests. How many are familiar with even now you're familiar with side quests? Makes the game longer. It may give you some extra treasures or something like that, but the idea is it makes the game longer. That's really the whole reason for side quests. If you're having so much fun, side quests are a great thing. If you're not having that much fun, you might want to skip the side quest and just go straight on. But they're there to make the game longer, whether you think so or not. Well, when we're talking about going straight forward, we're talking not about side quests. And Satan is big on getting you to do side quests. Things that look like they're going to help you. Things that look like they must be of God. But they're not. They're not going to necessarily hurt you. They're not going to necessarily make you forsake God. But what are they? They are side quests. They are lateral moves. They don't further the game, so to speak. It just takes longer to keep going straight forward. And if Satan can get you off on enough side quests, you never will get back to the main road. That's what he tries to do all the time. So he tries to get you off of that. But he's talking about here, we join together and go straight forward. And we have to have the attentiveness and keen vision. And remember, we can't separate those things. It doesn't make sense. It takes keen vision to know about how to pray and how to minister to the cares and the desires of others. And maybe you're the one who's going to supply some of those desires. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to do? I sat there and was driving out to Westminster yesterday, and I thought of 6 people that I'd like to give things to. And I suppose if I added all those things together, it only come to about $600,000. Slow day. I didn't really want to go to Westminster. But you see, and then I start praying about it. I want to do it. I want to do it. I want to do it. Oh. Now, what's the side quest? Well, I can't do that. How am I going to do that? Maybe I need to figure out how to do that. Maybe God's given me that and he wants me to figure out how to do it. Sounds like a side quest, doesn't it? You got to do what you're called to do is what it amounts to. Eagles are fearless. An eagle will never surrender to the size or strength of its prey. It will always give a fight to win its prey or regain its territory. Think David not giving in to Goliath. That's a good one. Let's think of this. We have watered down word that has taken what Jesus said out of context. One of these days, I'll teach on it. If someone slaps you on one side of the face, turn the other and let them slap you on that or hit you on that one. And people sit there and talk about turning the other cheek, and they haven't looked into it. They just take it at face value. No one does it. And guess what? That's not what he's talking about there anyway. I will give you a hint. If you do it right, the guy won't want to slap you again, or he won't for one reason or the other. Either he'll love you or he'll fear you, one of the two. But there's more to it than that. But here, the eagle doesn't give up his territory. He doesn't back down. He's not in fear. And if he does lose his territory, he fights to regain his territory. Well, that's completely different to the way most people think about getting slapped on the side of their face and turning their cheek over. And they use it in all different kinds of areas. Well, they use it in jobs. Well, God has something better for me. Well, God has something better for you, but he didn't mean for you to lose your territory on this one. And that's where some of that Christian TV comes in that is inaccurate. You'll be giving up your territory and constantly going on side quests instead of gaining ground. The eagle is fearless. He does not give up his territory. He does not back down in fear from anything or anyone. Neither should you. These are characteristics. Remember? We've looked at the other three. We're looking at the fourth. What else? 1 Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walks about seeking whom he may devour. Now, what do you think about that? You've heard me say it, you've heard Kenneth Copeland say it, you've heard Terry say it, you've heard everyone sit there and say, guess what? He just sounds like he's as a roaring lion. He's not a roaring lion. So what do? You marginalize him then, don't you? All of a sudden, he's just a roaring lion. He's not a roaring lion. He just acts like it. No big deal, is it? Well, it is a big deal. Because what does he do? He looks like a lion. He sounds like a lion. And he tells you he's a lion. Well, I know he's not. Really? All right. That's all well and good in the comforts of your church. But what happens when you get out there in the real world and you've got a lion who looks mean and sounds mean and tells you how mean he is and the way it's going to be? Now, all of a sudden, what are you doing? Poof, poof, poof. You're not real. You have no effect in my life. Really? Oh, good. Every so often you do it. Well, we're talking about doing it always in a constant basis. He's as a roaring lion. And I want you to meditate on your enemy looks strong. He tells you he is strong. And he tells you that you will fall and that the word will not work. Satan is the ultimate trash talker. You know what the problem with trash talking is? Satan developed it. You talk trash, guess what? You're out of faith. You can't talk trash and be in faith. You can't do it. You can't sit there and grab one thing. Does God talk trash? Oh, you say you're a tough Christian. Oh, you say you're part of me, but I think you're just a little girl. You ever hear God say that to you? If you did, it wasn't God. Satan's the ultimate trash talker. And if you want to participate in trash talking, then you'll get the rewards of a trash talker. He will be a roaring lion, and he will overcome and defeat you in some areas. We're just going to have to. It's gotten, it's always been this way, but the world has gotten worse if you haven't figured it out. You were born to be in this time. Fortunately, I was born. How many of us over the age of 30, oh, that's all of us. I remember when I could sit there and say over the age of 30, and Jason and Terry would just look at each other and go. How many of us pushing 40 or better, I'm just playing, that's trash talk, I shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, how many of us would like to go back and be a teenager again? How about you, Bill? You're shaking your head no. Anyone? How many want to go back and be 20? How about 20? Yeah? I had news for you. You wouldn't survive. You and I cannot survive. We were born in the time we should be in. And when we try to be out of time, then we're not going to be able to be victorious. You were born at the right time. You are living at the right time. Your age is at the right time. You know what it means to be 20 again? It means the dollar isn't worth as much as it was when you were 20. It means you got to, housing costs more than it ever has before.
That was a lot dumber.
You were a lot dumber. Well, Well, you just hadn't experienced things. I mean, there's things that, you might feel good about, but I mean, quite honestly, look what's happening now. Look what's happening now. I mean, we've got office space is so expensive unless you're working for a big company. They have these places where you got a big room. There's 6 different companies in there, all working and trying to make a buck, and people are working, 12, 15 hours a day, and they're working. And then what? They're getting small apartments, if even that. What's an 800 square foot apartment go for in Denver? Close to $1,000. Maybe even more depending where it's at. I mean, that wasn't the way it was when I was 20. I thought it was expensive. But it's not like the way it was. I don't want to be 20 again. It was hard enough the first time I went through it. Now, I'm out of my element. I'm dropped into a 20-year-old with by the way that 20-year-olds think. You think how well you think I'm going to get along? Did you know now that a lot of major companies have a interviewing process where your words, every part of the interview is being recorded, and it analyzes your tone and your words and your body language with a camera? Do you know that? I read about that. A lot of companies have that now. And you can say everything right, but the computer picks up one little tidbit. Maybe you had an itch, because it is artificial intelligence that don't account for itches, and you're answering and you go, dishonesty. I read all about this. I don't want a job interview like that. Are you kidding me? Have you ever joked in your job interview? You feel comfortable with the interviewer and you say a joke. I have. Got the job, by the way. But I have. Well, now the way they do things, no, you don't. You have to do it just right. Maybe you don't dress quite like they want you to, but they don't tell you how they want you to dress. So you go with what you believe is the right thing. Not at this company. I don't want to be 20. I don't want to have to go through it all over again. Well, I don't know if I'm all that thrilled being 63. So what's my alternative? Heaven's coming. Heaven's coming. And you get out of all of that. But until the meantime, we have to be fearless in what we're doing. We don't give up territory. Your enemy looks strong. He tells you he's strong, but he is not. He is deception. And if you listen and pay attention and act on it, he will eat you. There's just no two ways about it. God will not keep the devil from eating you. He will tell you how to fight him. Now, there's only one place where the Bible tells us he will fight the devil for you. That's in the area of the tithe. He will rebuke the devourer for your sakes. That's a little specialized there. We won't get into that today. But see, by and large, we're going to take that word. We didn't put on the whole armor of God just to pose and look good. Eagles are tenacious. Watch an eagle when a storm comes, when other birds fly away from the storm with fear. An eagle spreads its mighty wings and he locks them and uses the current to soar to greater heights. The eagle takes advantage of the very storm that lesser birds fear and head for cover. Now, don't you wish Christians took advantage of the storm? and rose above it, instead of looking at the storm and saying, oh, God has sent this storm to teach me something. I got news for you. If God sent it, are you going to fight it as a Christian? See, the idea is, if I'm Satan, if I can get you to believe that God sent the storm, then first of all, you'd be foolish to fight it for two reasons. Number one, I mean, after all, you're serving God. Number two, if God sent it, how am I going to fight it? So if we can get you to believe that God sent whatever you're going through, He sent this sickness to teach you something, He allowed this financial problem to come on you, you don't have enough for this and you don't have enough for that, but God is preparing you for greater things, and blah, 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 blah. Got to give it an extra one. You get a tip for the blahs. See? Then you're not going to fight it. But if we stay as eagles, we lock ourselves into our faith, and we allow that storm, we fight it. We fight that storm. We will not be moved, and what will happen? We will soar above it. Resist the devil, submit yourself to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. We can't allow the storms to define us. Have you ever let a storm define you? Of course you have. Through the years, you've let storms define you. If you're, when you see something, a storm or some problem out on the horizon, and I've done it. Lord, show me how to get through that. Then we've let the storms in the past define us. Say, I remember telling Jason and Terry and things like this, you guys don't study history. People don't study history so much. You need to study history, because I have watched this over and over. If you don't know what history says, you will repeat it. And it happens over and over and over. People repeat history because they do not learn what they should have stopped at it. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. Did you know that? Anti-Semitism, once again, is on the rise throughout the world. And if you study that a little bit, you find out it is of proportions that we haven't seen since right before the Second World War. So we have to keep our prayers down on that. Not allow it to wiggle into ourselves. See? We have to be attentive on these things. That's just one thing. Things become okay. There's things that I see that I think it's Denver Public Schools. That now have to put in gender neutral bathrooms. See, we're doomed, as long as contrary to what God has said in science and whatever you want to call it, nature, and how you're born. Now, I read about the man who is in court defending himself. He's about 60, and his case has a real shot of being dismissed, child molesting, because he identifies as an 8-year-old girl. True story. That was not thrown out of court. That is being heard by the court and the judge. Identifies as an 8-year-old girl. And the picture they showed, he's coming to court in little pigtails. He's got a scraggly beard. And he's, hefty, but he's got these pigtails, and he's wearing a little girl-like kind of dress. I suppose if you identify as one, you might as well give the proper props to it. See? Now what happens if that is, you're identifying as this, you're identifying as that. Not only is now a gender, it's age. I'm identifying as a 8-year-old little boy. Could I have my allowance this week, Terry? Oh, you don't give allowances? Who does? Who does in here? All right. You see? But see, what happens here? Nothing is real. You don't know what you're seeing if you stray off of the word. So we need our vision, like the eagle. We have to be tenacious. We can't allow storms to define us. We must only let victories define us. We have to be defined by our victories. Be defined by your healing. Be defined by your financial greatness. Be defined by those who you've led to the Lord. Be defined by those who you have prayed on and seen results. Be defined on how you have operated in faith and you've studied your Bible and you stay true to God and His Word. Be defined by that. Stand up and walk proud. Don't get out there and get mouthy. Be defined by it. And you will find you walk in excellence when you do. And if we let the storms define us, there will be no true victories. We use the storms. Now, here's what we use the storms for, because the storms have their use. Yes, we'd rather not have them at all. But here's how we use them. We use them to hone our kingdom skills and not let the storms tell us what our kingdom skills are. This is where you pull out all that big talk. All that big talk. I like new young Christians. Terry and Jason did it, 19, 20 years old. We're going to believe for this and that and this and this and this and the other thing. Haven't used their faith to believe in a pack of gum yet. But I like their talk. And they're talking, I'm going to believe this in. And they get a little off the track when they start talking about, well, everyone should do that, it's so easy. Have anyone heard Wade on the radio? Anyone? I've heard him. Does a great job. Does anyone think that radio stuff's really easy? What other good job is there? I mean, how about acting? How about being an actor? I mean, not one of them, community actors. I'm talking about the $20 million movie contracts. I want one of them. Do you think you can do that? See, I do. I've never done it. I always sit there to Janet, and we see something on TV and it says, so-and-so is getting $60 million for their next movie. I says, no one asked me to be in that movie. She just looks at me and says, you never even bothered getting an agent. And I said, do you think it'd do any good? You see, and we go back and forth there. See, it always looks easy until you have to do it. Terry used to sit there and he says, I'm believing God for a Monte Carlo, I believe it was. Monte Carlo car. He is driving what he called the sleigh, which... an Impala. He wanted the Impala. I'm sorry. I didn't say Monte Carlo.
The sleigh was correct.
He wanted an Impala. I always get some of them Chevys mixed up. He wanted an Impala. And he's driving the sleigh. And I mean, he wasn't, I don't think he's even married yet. And I mean, they're just getting on faith. They're getting all excited. And they're going to have an Impala. And Jason's going to get a Chrysler. And they're just all getting all mouthy about it. They stopped short and said, how come you're not driving something good? I don't know what I was driving. It wasn't bad. Is it? And, they hadn't even believed in a pack of gum. But, 3-4 years later, he was driving an Impala and he was driving a Chrysler. See? What happened? They didn't give up territory. They didn't allow lions come and say, how you going to get money for that? I mean, Terry is believing for an impala, and then the coppers try pulling him over. He's all mad at the cops and throwing his water bottles out the window and everything. Remember that? You got rear-ended, okay. And you got a ticket. That's why you were mad. You got a ticket. He's so mad. I threw that water bottle out the window and everything. I'm like, oh, oh. See, but guess what? He's not 20 anymore. You know, 20-year-old Terry. Good man. Didn't know as much as he knows now. 20-year-old Jason, good man. Doesn't know as much as he knows now.
Like I said, I walked around the parking lot, started praying in the spirit, and you go, you can't do that, man.
I'm sitting there, a 20-year-old Pete. We won't even go there. I told a story the other day to some people. One guy said, before you got into ministry, did you ever have a drink before you got into ministry? I told him a story. They said, you're worse than all of us. He said, no wonder you became a preacher. 20-year-old Pete is gone, you see. Eagles rise above everything, which makes everything else below them. And Isaiah 40:31 says, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run, not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. They that wait upon in Hebrew means to bind together by twisting, to expect, to gather together, and to wait upon, to wait on. So we're going to wait on the Lord. We're going to serve him. And we expect, and we gather together, and we expect, and we bind together with him and Christians of like faith. We bind together. And we're going to wait upon the Lord. And what's going to happen? We're going to receive his promises, not get sidetracked on anything. The attributes of these four faces are enough to keep us going and going straight forward to the receiving of the prize. The promises and the plans that the Father has made for you. Easy stuff, isn't it? The word's easy, it's the execution. Because when we try to execute, what happens? Side quests. Side quests. Sometimes we don't even know we're going on a side quest. And we have to keep these things straight and in order.